like having a clear market opportunity. And I know that in Gavi parlance, I've come to learn that innovation can happen either through push mechanisms where you say there's a clear market opportunity and often policy dictates that. So to give you an example, if you asked many companies in India, would you make a pneumococcal vaccine for the 200,000 people in India that would buy it no matter at what cost, the answer would be a no. But when you turn that around and you look at it and you say if government had a policy that said, I understand the burden of disease, and India will roll out pneumococcal vaccine 5 years from now for 100 million children, and we intend to make it affordable, but we will recognize that we will give you a fair price for it. I think the answer would be completely different. So that's one way of spurring innovation, have clear policy, and the market forces themselves will allow for it. Now this is specifically true for India because in countries like the US, private markets themselves are sufficient to spur that innovation, whereas that's not the case across drugs and vaccines in India. And I'm not specifically speaking just towards vaccines. The other part of it is, of course, the push mechanisms, the grant and aids, the funding, the development funding. And I think we should take a step back and look at, what are the resources available here? I'm not sure push mechanisms by themselves are enough in a country like India where the resources for innovation are so scarce. I mean, if you're talking about an NIH development budget of 30 billion and you want that to spur innovation in academia enough that it sustains innovation in industry, it's a completely different discussion than trying to say, well, we'll have a $1 million grant and aid for you to spur enough innovation to come up with a whole new vaccine and deal with all these problems related to AIDS, malaria, and TB. I think that's very naive for us to think that will happen.
Sir, what really has been the role of Gavi and international aid agencies in spurring innovation?
Well, before I get to that question, let me comment on some of the things Mahima has said, because you brought up the issue of the Big Five as being the place where innovation occurs, and I think that was true 30 years ago. That's not true today. Innovation occurs in the biotech sector. And what big companies do is they're constantly scanning the biotech sector, looking for good ideas and buying them, pulling them in, and then developing them. And I think what's interesting is that that's now a global market. So like India has bypassed landlines by going to cell phones, India could also bypass some of the innovation and technology by partnering with biotech companies. Obviously here in India that's a no-brainer, but with those in other countries, because what's happened is there are many more ideas than there are partnerships right now, particularly in hard economic times, and so innovative new technologies are sitting out there, and if Indian companies go and say, we'll partner with you, we'll work with you, you can move that technology in. So I think that's an exciting way to think about that. Now, one of the problems is that those companies generally are focused on diseases of the wealthy or products that would be interested in wealthy markets. So what about products for diseases of poverty, for the very poor? And for there, you need to have some type of incentive for companies to engage on that, whether it's Indian companies or European companies, etc., because that's not going to happen through a natural market force mechanism. Now, in terms of your question, what's Gavi's role in all of this? We've innovated around financing mechanisms, we've iterated around procurement mechanisms. We, of course, have not ourselves been involved with R&D, but the Gavi Alliance is an alliance. And the groups in the alliance are constantly working on innovation. And I think one of the questions is, going forward, should we focus more on trying to drive this type of innovation? Some through what Mahima has said, which is the pull mechanism of getting markets out there for these products. I agree with you fully that, if you look at India, 20% of the child deaths in India are occurring from pneumonia, 20%. So if the government was to stand up and say, this is something we want to tackle, we want to meet the Millennium Development Goals, to do that, we need pneumococcal vaccines. We'll start working with some of the existing manufacturers, but we want to spur our local manufacturers to move in this area. I think that would make a huge difference. So.
talked about the intervention of the big five in India, and in recent times, of course, you have seen Sanofi Aventis eventually acquiring Shanta. Do you see consolidation happening in this space? And there are two parts of this question. One, how will it affect supply? And secondly, what's your own personal comment on the government's recent policy of looking at acquisitions in the pharmaceutical space on a case-to-case basis?
Steph, can you answer that?
You're going to answer that.
Okay, so I'll answer this in two parts. One related to FDI itself, right? So the whole business about, should India curtail FDI in pharma, and is that going to increase prices? I think is completely unfounded. And I've said this on several occasions. If you look at the amount of innovation and actually the numbers in the pharmaceutical industry in India, I think the consolidation at the level it's happening now isn't going to impact availability of the product or pricing of the product it's a long shot to assume that. For vaccines specifically, I think it would be extremely dangerous to go down the path where you discourage investments because, vaccines, very high fixed costs, very risky, very, very capital intensive. So invariably, the handful of companies that are involved in vaccines are going to need to find mechanisms to leverage capital. Whether that's through strategic sources or not is each company's decision, of course, but it's inevitable that they're going to need huge access to capital to make these products, make them according to international GMP standards and so on. Now, to the second part of the question, what do I think about if these consolidations happen, will it affect supply? I think that depends, again, on the strategy of each individual company. Worldwide, the vaccine industry is fairly small. So, apart from just consolidation in India, across the industry, consolidations have severe implications just because the numbers are so few. But if you look at it from the other side, this should be viewed as a remarkable success story because the world is recognizing that Indian companies make very, very high quality vaccines. And our cost structures still deliver this in a way that's affordable. And this is a completely different business model than the large companies. So there's a learning to be had there, and I think that these companies recognize that. And Indian companies can use that to partner for innovative products. So I think if you turn this around, this could be a great opportunity on both sides. There's some balancing of power there, but whether that would result in less supply of vaccines, more supply, and at what cost, I think really depends on the individual company and their strategies. Even without consolidation amongst the large companies, there are some whose business models cater to even public markets, such as UNICEF, through the AMC mechanism or not, and there are others that are very focused on just delivering vaccine to their country or the high-value economies. So that's maybe not a straightforward answer.
One other point on the innovation is going back to quality. It's not only the quality of the regulatory agency, it's also the quality of the research that's going to be done. So if we're going to bring innovative products into the market and then do the clinical development here in India, the design of those clinical trials, the sample sizes of those clinical trials, the reliability of the data, the quality assurance in that, so that then one can hold that data package up and say this would meet standards anywhere in the world. Because when it comes down to it, if it's an innovative new product, not only is WHO going to be wanting to look at that, but their lens is going to be, how do we make sure this really meets the standard that we have true knowledge here and not a study that is sloppy enough that leaves us wondering about the efficacy here or the safety or any of those other issues. And so it means having high quality clinical research if that is the pathway that one goes. One other point that I would passionately argue for, when we have AEs, SAEs, which, by the way, temporarily we will always have. Children will die during, rollouts of vaccines during trials because children are dying. Unfortunately, the child mortality rate is high enough. We're going to see deaths. We're going to see illness. The challenge is we have to have a really good system to investigate that, and then we have to be transparent with the results, because the press hears there's been a death, there's been a number of children who have been ill, and then they never hear the investigations that have occurred. And what we need to make sure is that we're very transparent with, we did a very careful investigation, the results are the following, there is no association, because that will give people confidence into believing what's going on. Did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted also to reflect on the clinical trial issues. The clinical trials scaled up in India